Bob Chesney's press conference is a reminder UCLA absolutely hired the right guy to lead their program.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to this edition of the Locked On UCLA podcast. I'm your host, Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for making this show your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever it's your podcast, and it's available on YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. Welcome back, everydayers. Tune into the number one sports podcast network out there. Locked On UCLA is a part of it. So thanks for making this show your first listen. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. What we're talking about today, UCLA men's basketball statement week. They get to take on top 10 Gonzaga. We've got UCLA women's basketball recap in their domination over a then undefeated Oregon Ducks squad in their Big Ten opener. But we have to lead with this. UCLA continually is making the right steps, making maybe miniature strides, sprinting in the right direction, hopefully, when it comes to hiring Bob Chesney. I'm not sure if you watched the press conference, aside from other comments. No. Did you watch the Bob Chesney press conference? Have you seen the videos put out there by the UCLA Football social media team of Bob talking to the players, listening to him answer the questions, giving a statement to you, the fan, to you, the donor, to me, the loudmouth, to the players, to the supporters, to the community, to the Southern California football people, to the entire state of California, to Los Angeles, to everybody, that UCLA is going to be a player. He didn't mince words when he was saying, I expect to win here. He's not guaranteed. He's not saying not those exact words, but what I'm taking away is that revolution is coming. He doesn't want to be the other school. He understands. He knows the success of the program. He will study the rich tradition of UCLA. Even Martin Jarmans, whatever your thoughts about him, talked about rich history of tradition. Bob Chesney also referenced the ideas and the ideals of success of a UCLA athletic department, trying to get back into touch with Southern California high schools. There's so many talented players in so many talented places. The Bruins just tap in to a couple of those. You're going to have a lot of high school recruiting ranking upticks. You're going to be a lot higher in the national rankings. You can build into the community. You know what UCLA has become? A miniature laughingstock in the football fan base that's squished between the Rams, the Chargers, USC, and UCLA. Sprinkle in a couple of Central Valley and some San Diego State fans with Fresno State and everything, and you've got yourself a really congested middle of the state to the bottom tip of California. When UCLA used to be, can and will be competitive. Well, Bob Chesney, one of my favorite quotes he said, and I'm not going to get this exactly right because I'm going off the top of my head, but he was defining what failure is and what success is. Failure is mismanaged success, and success is how you handle failure. All right, that's kind of what it boiled down to. His ability to communicate, understanding what it takes to win at every level, to get them ahead of the curve, whether it was at Salve Regina, Assumption, whether it was at Holy Cross, JMU, or now UCLA. Yeah, he knows what it takes to get ahead of the game, to get back up, because these are places that were not winners. All right, he frequently referenced not making that many bucks. Thousands of dollars, less than $10,000, $5,000 in part of his first places. Even being at Johns Hopkins, which is an elite academic institution at the beginning of his days. But it feels like sometimes you're guys that are going out there, we want to do it for the commitment, do it for the soul, do it for the heart of the game. And then they bolt and leave their Ole Miss job for LSU in the middle of a playoff when he could have been beloved in Oxford forever in a manner that was less than forthcoming, less than uber dramatic. It was just crazy in Lane Kiffin. And then you listen to Bob Chesney talk, and you want to believe everything. You want to go through a door for the dude who is going to be going crazy these next couple of weeks trying to build his program, currently James Madison, to beat Oregon and maybe advance in the CFP if they pull off one of the biggest upsets ever, and also build the UCLA program that he mentioned we do need ties to the West Coast. It's not just a complete overhaul of James Madison to UCLA, it's who can represent the brand, who can bring UCLA together while also bringing everything that is him. And he mentioned, I've learned, but I'm staying true to myself. Most importantly, building a network to make these guys better men, husbands, fathers, friends, before they're all just football players. But he's not shying away from the fact that you have to win. Amazing ability to communicate to the fan base. It's unbelievable. He gets it. UCLA, with what they did with this coaching search committee, got it. They identified Bob Chesney so long ago. This 5-year deal, from what I was seeing reported by LA Times, what they put on the little sheet that they're handing out at the media press conference, $6.75 million over 5 years. If it even takes him that long to become a superstar here in Westwood. What some might say, I've seen circling around Hollywood, circling around social media, Hollywood Bob. All right, Bob Chesney. Man, it's all about Bob, right? But in the good of senses. This is the guy that will lead UCLA to success. You look at the guys out there. You could have gotten Lane Super Drama Kiffin. You could have gone after Jed Fish, but I think that would have been the West Coast equivalent of a Lane Kiffin situation, leaving Oxford to go to LSU. A little less, would have been a lot less covered, but it could have been something like that. They went after Jed Fish. Some guys that are on the verge, like a Sean Lewis, who I'm pretty sure was pretty close to UCLA, could have gone after some other Mountain West schools, soon to be Pac-12 schools in some cases. But this is a guy who took James Madison as a G5 team to the playoff. Obviously, if you had different rules and different things, maybe that's not the case. But with the rules provided, he brought them to be impressive enough that they didn't even sniff looking at 8-5 Duke. That James Madison continues and always is a solid program, or wherever Bob Chesney is. I saw the stat the other day, 6 second-half shutouts. That's something that David Schultz brought up from Locked On Sunbelt when I had him on last week. He said this dude makes second-half adjustments like no tomorrow. That game was pretty close against Troy. A little closer for my taking in that Sunbelt championship game. But clearly, the adjustments were made. No points after halftime. 6 times second-half shutouts. So the guy gets the X's and O's, puts the right staff in place, and gets these guys jobs beyond the football field, opportunities to stay connected to the community that they're in, from the Salve Reginas all the way to what he wants to bring at UCLA, but he understands this community is to win. All these places that went after new coaches, and UCLA, I think, got the best of hires. A program builder, a loyal guy who is going to be here and build the Bruins back up. Even if they don't win, even if it doesn't lead to 10 to 12 wins, ever, I think in this cycle, it has led to success. 2 years ago, you could have had Jonathan Smith fired. Jed Fish, interesting. I've seen some Washington fans frustrated with his success or lack thereof, considering they came off a CFP national championship game appearance. I don't know what they're thinking about in Seattle. But Jed Fish would be interesting. Other guys were top-tier candidates. Could have gone with Tony White, but he's really soured since Florida State went bad and went terribly downhill after that season-opening win against Alabama over the last couple of cycles. So maybe, dare I say, a blessing it was that UCLA had to hit rock bottom, literal rock bottom. And Deshaun Foster, unfortunately, had to guide the ship. Not sure if it was even going to be salvageable, whether it was or was not Deshaun Foster, but where they went from getting rid of Jim Mora, going to Chip Kelly, who the Bruins decided to pony up for money, but they realized, and now with the changing landscape of college sports, there's even more commitment, and you have to think outside the box even more. And UCLA did that in the search, brought him in, allowed him to coach at JMU through the playoff, through the Sun Belt Championship game, with the help of a shifting portal opening after New Year's Day. It allows UCLA to calmly execute the search, no rush, and despite them being pretty much out of the long-term open jobs, I'm not including the Washington States here, the guys that have had jobs open for a long time, UCLA is the last one to announce. They absolutely are the last one to announce. But I think they did so effectively, and I think Bob Chesney continues to prove he's the guy. There's already guys recruiting that he's recruited that are coming to UCLA, that are committed. The portal, he showcased successes from taking over from Kurt Cignetti at James Madison to creating his own playoff team at James Madison a year after, 2 years after Kurt Cignetti's taken over Indiana. The Bruins have the right guy in charge. Now it's about time we show up. I don't want it to be SoFi, but wherever it is, and give the man support. Whether it's the money donation, the NIL contribution, just simply showing up and cheering for this UCLA team, even if they are only 7-5 or 5-7 in the first year. Let's go. That'll be an uptick from where this program was trending downward for many, many years. Now we got some direction, and Chesney's the man. Next, speaking about dominance, the UCLA women's basketball team dominated Oregon. Let's go over the numbers after this. The holidays come with two big goals: feeding people well and finding gifts they'll actually love. And when you want both handled in one move, Omaha Steaks is the way to go. From hosting to gifting, they deliver the world's best steak experience right to your door. Because during their Sizzle All the Way sale, you can stock up and save in a huge way. 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. Gets even better. Locked On College listeners get an extra $35 off with code COLLEGE at checkout. You've got so many options. You got fillets, burgers, comfort meals. You can build a box for anybody, and it's holiday magic made easy. Order by 6 p.m. Eastern for us Pacific Coasters. That's 3 p.m. Pacific, and it ships the same day. Save big on gourmet gifts and more holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Sizzle All the Way sale. Extra $35 off. Use the promo code COLLEGE for checkout. Terms apply. See the site for details. That's omahasteaks.com, code COLLEGE. All right, cruising on the UCLA women. In the midst of one of their best runs in program history, at least modern history. They obviously have won a national championship prior, but not in the NCAA era, which means it's been a very long time for UCLA on the women's side. First time in the NCAA era last year, they made the Final Four. This year, they're trying to do something with this super class of seniors to be as successful as they've ever been, which is to reach the pinnacle, win the national championship, prove everybody wrong, from the South Carolinas to the UConns, maybe even getting a second chance at Texas later in the year. Who knows? Well, the Bruins open Big Ten play against a Big Ten opponent that was unbeaten yet unranked in Oregon. Oregon, who probably hadn't played much, hasn't been the same since their Sabrina Ionescu days. It's a team that is still looking to be successful in the Big Ten, the Oregon Ducks, who I think they were one of the programs hit the hardest because of COVID. They didn't get that glory run from Sabrina. They didn't get that opportunity. But enough lamenting about the Oregon Ducks. This is about a UCLA team sitting in the top four still, although I still think they should be in the top three, in a Big Ten conference that set a record for 9 ranked teams in the top 25. I think it was a record, or as close to it. 9 ranked Big Ten teams in the top 25. That is absurd. You're getting close to 40% of the top 25 is represented by half the conference. And if Oregon had beat UCLA, they would have been in the top 25. Well, that didn't happen because Corey Close's team overwhelmed the Ducks. They came out and they didn't wait. They didn't need to go bad immediately. All right. UCLA led 19-8. They came out and they were ready to go. What do I mean by that? Oregon started 3 of 18 from the field, 16% from the floor. UCLA led by 11 after the first quarter, up by 23 at halftime, and just held on for an 80-59 win. Okay, this is still without a 3-point shooter in Tamia Gardner, an extra weapon, and Lauren Betts' younger sister, Sienna Betts, one of the top recruits in the country, which would give post depth for a UCLA team that's always been force-feeding Lauren Betts if she's in foul trouble or needs rest. The Bruins have another weapon that they just haven't been able to use. Corey Close, after that game, said the expectation is for Betts, younger Betts, Sienna Betts, to come in and get some minutes in their next upcoming game. Minor minutes in a game against Cal Poly of the Big West that the Bruins expect to dominate, but we'd love to see Sienna Betts get some minor run time there. Players who stood out in this game: Lauren Betts, 24 and 14, back to her dominant ways, 5 block shots, plus 31 in 32 minutes played. UCLA, would they win this game by? 31. That's how dominant Lauren Betts is. She's plus 31 in a game that UCLA wins by, 21. I can't do my math right. 21. But that's what they normally win by. So Betts with the double-double. Hawkins, after one of the more dominant weeks you could find, coming off Thanksgiving, the Tennessee game, the few games at Thanksgiving, she was absolutely dominant in those wins. Didn't need to do a lot against Oregon, but now that she's showcasing she can shoot it from deep on tape, teams are going to effectively try to take her out of the ball game and let UCLA win it through Lauren Betts. Sometimes teams force the others to win it. Sometimes others will let Lauren Betts get her 30 and 15 and force the teammates to win. It's all a give and take depending on who you're playing. Lauren Betts was the leading scorer. Here are the other standouts: Kiki Rice, Hawkes, and Ledger Walker, all with less than 10 points. Not the best of shooting days for Kiki or Charlize, although for Charlize, she had 8 assists, 10 rebounds, almost had a double-double with no points, or without points involved. She did have a couple of points. But imagine that, the ability to showcase and share the basketball. Kiki Rice, still with 7 assists of her own, and the Bruins in 30 made field goals had 22 assists. And that is when you have a dominant force like Lauren Betts, the Bruins have to feed her, so naturally you're going to get a lot of opportunities for assists. The ball was moving around, and the Bruins could score. Not one of their best shooting days from 3, 7 of 22. John Neepkins went 3 of 6 from downtown, 17 points, and the other double-figure score. Surprisingly, Lena Bilic in 23 minutes shot almost 50% and had 13 points for the youngster on this UCLA roster. Wasn't one where Dugalich came in and scored. Some of the usual players that don't get the ball between Hawkes and Dugalich, those weren't the superstars. It wasn't like Ledger Walker dominated and scored. It was a combined effort between UCLA's sharpshooter from Utah, John Neepkins, Lena Bilic, and Lauren Betts. Those were the statistical leaders in this game. UCLA, 40 of their 80 points coming in the paint. So they know how to score outside of the paint, get in the paint, make a decent amount of their free throws, and they led this game for 39 and a half minutes. 39 and a half. This is a conference I thought UCLA would run through. Well, they're still recovering for some injury, the likes of Sienna Betts. You're mixing in waiting for Tamia Gardner to return from injury if she does. And then UCLA is one of the more deep conferences I've ever seen in the Big Ten. Now, are they as good as last year when you had some of the top tier talent with Juju and USC? I don't think they're as deep or as good as that could be, but Michigan, one time down big to UConn, played them pretty evenly down the stretch. So Michigan's probably a lot better. I did boldly come out and proclaim UCLA, if healthy, should run the table. I didn't think UCLA would be the longest unbeaten with their injuries, and that proved to be the case, losing to Texas prior to Thanksgiving Day. I didn't expect them to lose Texas, but the Longhorns beat South Carolina and UCLA in back-to-back days, showcasing, hey, they are the number 2 team in the country at the moment. The Bruins, though, I thought they could run the table fairly easily in Big Ten play. It will be a lot tougher than even I expected, but we'll see if these are just good teams or great teams. UCLA is a great to elite team. A lot of these Big Ten teams are good, or maybe they're just getting the marketing because they're in a super big conference and they've beaten up on other opponents. We'll find out when UCLA gets to the rest of non-conference play, gets hopefully completely healthy, and I'd love to see what Sienna Betts can do in limited fashion against Cal Poly coming up next. Not that if she scores 15 or scores 5, that's going to be the end of the world, but if UCLA has another post threat, whether she can stretch it out or not, that just adds another dynamic for UCLA post game that isn't only exclusively going to Lauren. That just adds so much more to UCLA's dynamic that if Betts needs a rest, she can play 20, be a plus 20 on the floor, and Sienna can do something similar in a different way for UCLA. That means it's not just Lauren's job to pick up fouls on the bigs. They have to work just as hard, hopefully, to guard Sienna, get rebounds, block her shots, get through her defensively, like they do when Lauren Betts is on the floor. And if they're on the floor at the same time ever, my goodness, this team could be lethal, dominant in the post, impossible to move. while also having a team that can shoot it much better from three. And on their best of days, when Neepkins is hitting, Hawkins is hitting, Dugalich is hitting, you might not need it to be a Gardner. But when she's back in the fold, the Bruins, pretty tough to beat. So excited to see UCLA 9-1, 1-0 in Big Ten play. That's their one outlier early game, and we'll see how the rest of it goes later on in this season. Next, I'm talking UCLA men's basketball. Back in the top 25, huge matchup. It's a statement week. What's the optics looking like for the Bruins heading into this Gonzaga matchup? And we'll get keys later in a later show. But let's talk about what's going on for the Bruins right now. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. With 48 teams getting in the event for the first time ever, it's going to be massive, but let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why with the Gametime app, it's super clutch, and it gives fans the real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Gametime, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts with great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. Puts the power back into your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. Pull up the app. The layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups, compare seat views, pick a game, tap a section, and you can have your tickets within minutes. No confusion and no hunting for the fine print. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with World Cup tickets and every match, every concert, every event with the World Cup with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Gametime. All right, cruising on here, UCLA men's basketball has an interesting week ahead of them. The Bruins, a chance to get a statement win and get back on everybody's national radar. Here's the only thing, though. Last year, when UCLA got that win against Arizona and against Gonzaga, it really didn't benefit them whatsoever. Whatsoever, it did not. I was hyped about last year's team with all the transfers coming in. They got big wins over Arizona, 2 wins over Oregon, a win over Gonzaga, and you're like, okay, they beat every team on the West Coast, including Arizona and Gonzaga, and yet they were ranked significantly lower than both Oregon and Arizona, despite being a combined 3-0. Arizona and Oregon were ranked in such a way that they played each other in the second round. UCLA had to play a second-seeded Tennessee, okay? So as much as this Gonzaga game is huge, UCLA, a top 25 team, the Bruins are going to have to prove they can win on the road. They did so against Washington. They were dominant early against Oregon, only to let them right back in it, but still pulled away. So as much as this game coming up against Gonzaga is huge, let's not forget that they still might say, we don't give a damn. That's still what might happen here in the latest updated rankings, bracketology, whatever. This is what UCLA looks like right now, according to Joe Lunardi's latest bracketology here on December 9th. The latest, most updated bracketology. UCLA is currently an 8 seed. Put them in the South, that would put them in the Houston region. Ironically, you know who UCLA would be playing as a 9 seed? Kentucky. That would be one of the most watched, hyped, overhyped, most crazy blue blood battle in the first round for teams with massive expectations and potentially growing groans for their head coach. Obviously, Kentucky fans have voiced their opinion about Mark Pope. If UCLA fell short in a hypothetical matchup on this very day, that would be interesting for Mick Cronin, but that's just where UCLA is right now, an 8 seed, okay? So the Bruins, depending on how you do your math, obviously 8 times 4 of the 4 regions, that put them in the 30th ranked team range. Between 28 to 32 is where Joe Lunardi has them. Of course, he has to balance the whole tournament, as do the committee, not having Big Ten matchups in the first round. That's not what they want. And if you play Kentucky, that means those are 2 teams hovering just around or outside the top 25. UCLA, according to the AP poll, is right at 25. They played Cal, lost in a neutral site road game, but neutral site game without Bilodeau. Hopefully that can be factored in when it comes to seeding. UCLA had some good pieces going, good things going against Arizona, and now Arizona's the #1 team in the country. That's how much of a missed opportunity it was that the Bruins had against Arizona at the Intuit Dome. They were up 8 in that game. They led the majority of the game. And instead, they're on the other end. But then in their other games, which is I think it's what's hurting the optics for UCLA and the analytics, they have been way playing down to their competition in the mid-majors. Eastern Washington, a team UCLA I thought should have won by 25-30. Oh, interesting. The rest of the games really didn't dominate the competition. Pepperdine, the Bruins beat by what, 11? Pepperdine just lost a home game to Vermont. And now Vermont has been a team that's in the Northeast that does make the tournament, but they shouldn't fly across the country to beat Pepperdine, and then Pepperdine doesn't get blown out by UCLA. Like, what's going on there? So it's a bit not Jekyll and Hyde. How much of it has been Donovan Dent dealing with what Cronin said, an oblique injury and a lower leg injury. And then you had Bilodeau, who's been hurt, Trent Perry, who played with a sprained ankle. So the Bruins, one of their worst losses, which was the Cal loss, they play without Bilodeau, one of their leading scorers. They went to Washington and won. Washington, who just won at USC, also down 18 at the half, and came back to beat the Trojans, who were shorthanded, by the way. UCLA, without Trent Perry, went there with what, a 5 to 6 man rotation and beat Washington with one of their better teams they've assembled in recent years, including Hans Steinbach, who is legit. I've heard that told to me by other people who've watched Washington's other games. And Washington was as healthy as it gets for their part of their opening part of the season, and the Bruins went to Washington and won. All right? So right now, sitting as a first round 8 seed. Now, top 25 against a Gonzaga team who currently is a 2 seed in the Midwest. So if Gonzaga is sitting as a 2 seed, UCLA's already played a neutral site game against a overall 1 seed. UCLA has a grand opportunity to get the monkey off their back, to get that opportunity against Gonzaga in Seattle, which is still only to be considered as a neutral site win. That's a quad 1 opportunity. UCLA beats Gonzaga. That means those are 2 teams with 2 losses. Gonzaga, the other one, losing by 40 to Michigan on a neutral floor. If UCLA can go beat Gonzaga, all of a sudden they go from 25 to 30 range to middle of the pack of the 15 to 20 range, like they were in most preseason polls. USC is sitting there as a 6 seed. That's how much they view USC's Feast Week run in Maui. How they've been able to play despite going to triple overtime with Troy, with what they've done so far. Now, the UCLA Bruins can help themselves by beating Gonzaga, beating an Arizona State team that's played better than even I've expected earlier in this season. And then when they get Purdue at home, when they get Michigan and Michigan State on the road, this Big Ten schedule affords UCLA so many more opportunities that other teams just don't get in the ACC in this day and age, and some places in the Big East, although they're very competitive at the top there. Every night in and night out, UCLA will be potentially playing a quad 1 or a fringe quad 1 to quad 2 game. But if you start now and you can prove you win this one now, away from home, it won't exactly be rowdy like it could be at the Kennel in Spokane. But in Seattle, I expect it to be fairly pro-Gonzaga. Not like it would be if it was even in Spokane Arena, just away from Gonzaga. UCLA can prove they can get wins away from home, which they generally didn't do last year, although they were better at it in neutral site games. And then find a way to get those things going. Against Gonzaga, we'll have a full-on preview. I'll have Andy Patton, host of Locked On College Basketball and Locked On Zags. We'll have that for the Thursday show, or Thursday, Friday. I will be recording that in a couple of days. If the Bruins are healthy with Trent Perry, then I think UCLA will have enough to beat them. Do I think they will? I think UCLA might fall short by a basket or 2 on this very day. All right, I know Trent Perry just returned against Oregon, but is he healthy enough to play the amount of minutes that he will need to against Gonzaga and be that key guy off the bench that can win the game for the Bruins? Because remember, UCLA outplayed Gonzaga for the majority of the game, and it took the last minute holding off the Zags to win that game in the Intuit Dome a year ago. That was the first time the Bruins played at the Intuit Dome, home of the Clippers, which have been very fun, rowdy, feisty crowds, largely in favor of the Bruins. But they need something to go their way in the winning column. Get a quad 1 win. That's something they're missing against a top-tier, nationally relevant program. The win against Washington was impressive. Oregon, unfortunately, is struggling early in this year, so it's not going to go far now as a nationally relevant win. But beating Gonzaga, the Bruins go back on everybody's radars, and that's what we need. More full game-on-game, matchup moments. We'll talk about that in future episodes. And we'll talk more about UCLA, the transition to Bob Chesney, future games coming up here on Locked On UCLA. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. Like, comment, subscribe, download. Thanks for your support. And hey, let's tell you about this new thing we're doing with Locked On. It's called the Everydayer Club. All right, well, what's this Everydayer Club? Well, thanks for making Locked On UCLA your first listen. Thanks for making this the #1 sports podcast network. Locked On. You already live your team every day. Now level it up and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club and get Locked On UCLA with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more. $5 a month, $50 a year. Go look up on the Locked On Sports Podcast Network website, and hey, check the link for show notes and more information. Thanks for tuning into the show. Hands up, Bruins fans. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA, fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Zach signing off. Go Bruins.